This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 43 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast, and this episode is all about how authors travel to research their novels. It's quite a niche topic, but it's one that I hope you'll all find really interesting. I know a lot of you are avid readers just like I am. Now, it all came around because of my author friend Natasha, who I'll speak with shortly on this episode, and I noticed that she kept on going on these trips to do research for her novels. Because obviously whenever any of my friends go travelling, I'm curious about where they're going and what they're doing, and I really follow along. And Natasha was being very clever about the settings she was using in her novels. She certainly wasn't setting them in our hometown of Perth here in Australia or anywhere sort of unexciting like that, but she was setting them in cool cities like New York City and Paris, which I thought was pretty clever and a great way to sort of have to travel. But not only that, I certainly noticed that when she was on these trips and I would see her post on Facebook every day, I realised that what she was doing when she was travelling with that kind of a special purpose was a really amazing way to travel. Like, it's a really different way to look at a place and a really rewarding way to travel. So thinking of all that, I thought I needed to ask more. And so today I have 3 novelists to chat to. They've all written books which are set in various foreign places, and they've all travelled to research for their novels, which I love reading and writing as well. So combining all of that with travel just seems like, a dream come true. So today the first author I'm going to speak to is this friend who inspired it, it's Natasha Lester. So she's a Perth-based author who writes now historical fiction, and she has some very interesting tales to tell about her research trips to these amazing places.
Well, my husband jokes that I choose places to set my books in based on where I want to travel to next. And I always say, well, why wouldn't you if you had the choice?
I think it's a great idea.
So obviously I've chosen places like Paris and New York and glamorous, exciting places like that. First real trip for book research probably should have turned me off the whole idea for life, because I managed to go to New York at the same time as Hurricane Sandy, which was obviously a hugely devastating event for the US. And I found myself basically trapped in a hotel with massive sheets of glass falling down around me.
That is not good.
I know. Stuck on the Lower East Side. So that was where there was no power, no running water, no flushing toilets, no phones, no communication. Like, literally, New York was brought to its knees in a way that I had never imagined a city like that could be. So needless to say, that first research trip was very unsuccessful, and I was able to get out of New York after about 3 days. I think I had to wait for a plane, and I came home with nothing, having had very high expectations.
An interesting disaster story, perhaps, but
Yes,
no historical
exactly.
research.
No, nothing at all. So, and I couldn't even get in touch with the people I'd made appointments with to say that I wasn't coming, because
Gosh.
no email and no phone, nothing was working. So, yes, that was a really, really bizarre experience. You would go up above, I think it was 38th Street, was everything up above there had power, and in the public toilets of all the big department stores like Bergdorf's and Saks, everyone had their phone chargers plugged in at the Met, at MoMA. Like, wherever you could get power, there were people wanting power.
Oh no, what a disaster.
I know. So anyway, so I came back home and I thought to myself, right, I will go back. And so 6 months later, in the American summertime, thinking no hurricanes would occur in summertime, hopefully.
You would like to hope so.
I went back, yes. This time I took my husband and kids, because I thought maybe it was like my punishment for abandoning children or something like that.
Fair enough, it's worth a try.
I know. So my husband did a very good job of babysitting the kids whilst I was out doing my research, and I tried to sort of set it up so I'd do a morning of research and then spend the afternoon doing family sightseeing things, which was great. So I basically needed to go to the Columbia Medical School archives. I spent a lot of time up there searching through dusty boxes, which was great. the New York Public Library is obviously an amazing
Oh,
resource,
yeah.
and they have so many archive boxes about so many different topics. And I was able to go to their theatre on film and tape division and search through boxes of stuff about the Ziegfeld Follies, which was lots of fun.
Oh.
And as well as those kind of more formal things, just informal things like walking through Greenwich Village and the Upper East Side in particular, because those were two big locations in my book. And obviously most of the architecture is the same now as it would have been back in the 1920s when my book was set.
Of
So
course, yeah, that's handy.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So just snapping so many photos of everything, even just, you know, on the Upper East Side, you can still see the arched entranceways to the old stables that used to be there. They've been bricked over and made into, you know, apartments and that kind of thing now, but you can still see where they were and what they would have looked like. So, you know, so many great things that you can find by just getting out in the streets and walking around and seeing what's there.
Yeah, you're so lucky. Was it difficult to get access to stuff like at the library? Was it, easy to say I'm researching for a book and so can I look at XYZ?
Yeah, that trip was pretty easy. Pretty much everything I asked for, I was able to. The thing is, you've got to give people a bit of warning because mostly they store their archive boxes off-site, and so you've got to give them enough time to get in the material that you want.
Right.
So I found I was able to tee up all of my appointments that I wanted to and go and sit down and do that. I went back to New York and Paris, in fact, in 2016, so just last year, and I had a little bit more trouble with a couple of things that I wanted to look at there. I was a little bit more last minute organising the trip, although I still had about a month's notice, but even that I found with one particular museum that I wanted to go and look at some fashion illustrations and fashion sketches from the 1940s. They had all their research appointments already booked up, so I wasn't able to do that.
Right.
But the good thing is you get in touch with somebody like that and they say, no, we can't help you, but did you know that this institution also has fashion sketches from that period available and they might be available for you to look at? And so that was great. So I contacted this other university and went and looked at theirs instead, and that was just as good.
Oh, fabulous.
Also with fashion, I really wanted to look at a lot of the actual clothes, but because they're so fragile and delicate, the Museum of the City of New York has this amazing collection, but you're not really allowed to go and look at any of it, which is a shame.
That's a shame. Yes, it exists, but for nothing, kind of.
Yeah, really, yeah. And that is a real shame. I mean, I know they do special exhibitions. Like I went to the Met and saw their costume exhibition, which was amazing and it was perfect. It was exactly what I was after. So they bring out things in the same way for their annual exhibitions, but otherwise all these things are just locked away and nobody can look at them. And I kind of understand they're so precious, but it's also like, but why?
Yeah.
It's so valuable to see them.
Yeah, well,
So
that's right. If they're
I
never
guess
going to get
that's
seen, then that's sort of, then why keep them almost? But
I guess that's the conundrum of preservation versus access, and they sort of balance up and weigh up there. So yes, so no, not normally very difficult, but time is definitely a big thing, giving people enough notice. And even if you're unsuccessful with one place, I've usually found that they're more than willing to redirect you to somewhere else that might be able to help you if they can't.
Oh, fabulous. It's such a different way to travel and to get access to stuff that the average Joe wouldn't normally be able to see. So it seems like if you're travelling as an author, it's kind of a key to unlocking the doors to some special places that the average traveller doesn't get to see. I mean, perhaps sometimes it's just all you need to do is ask, but we never think to ask. But it's something I've been thinking more about. Like if you travel somewhere and you have a special interest in it, then let people know and see who you can meet when you get there. I love the research that Natasha does, and I keep wondering where her future novels will be set. Will she stray from New York and Paris, perhaps London or Rome, or my suggestion, Tash, would be Berlin. That's my favourite spot, so try that out for me. Now, our next guest today is another Australian novelist. This is Kate Forsyth, who has published over 40 novels, which is astounding to me. And she has travelled to all kinds of places to do research for them. We chatted about such destinations as Venice and Paris and Scotland. And Kate has lots of interesting stuff to say about kind of the how-to and what she aims to do when she's travelling to research for her novel.
Well, I've always had a bit of a gypsy soul, and so I've always loved to travel, and I'm always interested in other cultures, other places, other times, other than my own place and time.
Right.
And so for me, every single time I travel, I get so many new ideas. And of course, if I'm working on a novel which is set in another place and time, well, then I need to go at least to the place I'd like to go to the time, but
That would be marvellous, wouldn't it?
wouldn't it? But that's why we love historical fiction, because it allows us to be armchair time travellers.
So true. Do you have a specific way you do research when you're actually writing a novel that's set somewhere? Do you?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So some people find it quite counterintuitive because I tend to do my research trip when I have written all or most of my first draft.
Oh, interesting.
And this is because until I've actually written the book, I don't actually know what I need or where the book is necessarily going to be set.
Right.
Even though I am someone that plans quite carefully, the story always goes off in unexpected directions. Things that you think that you were going to do, you don't end up doing, and new parts of the story throw themselves up for you. And so it would be a waste of my time to go to a place and just wander around aimlessly, not knowing what I need.
Right.
I go when I've got a complete skeleton of the story where I know where every scene is set and I know what I need to find out to bring the story to life.
Mm-hmm.
And I plan my trips, my research trips, as carefully as I plan my novels so that I get the maximum out of it. Because, I'm a mother with 3 children and a home and a husband and pets. And I can't really just go off wandering around the world on my own.
Yes, and you're setting your novels in places very far from home, aren't you? So it's not...
That's exactly right. I have to be very careful with my time and with how efficiently I use my time. And so, my research trips happen as close to the end of the book as I can manage it.
Interesting. And it makes perfect sense. It sounds sort of unusual as you say it, but it makes perfect sense to do it that way. Do you find on these research trips, do you ever uncover things that then change something about your novel?
Of course. That is, I suppose, one of the primary reasons for doing it, because you find out things that you couldn't possibly have known before. No matter how well you do your research and how wonderful the resource the internet is in allowing you to see what things look like. It's not till you're there that you actually really get a strong sense for the emotional resonance of a place. And of course, traveling there, I tend to go to a lot of museums. I meet up with experts in their field. I go and talk to local historians and they tell me things, or I discover things that I didn't know before that then work their way into the book. But one of the things I think that's really important to understand as well is that when I go to a place that is, I have a story set there, I'm going in the skin of my characters. I'm going there imagining what life would have been like for them, how they would have felt, what they would have seen, what they would have smelt. And I'm not truly within the skin of my characters until I've been working on the book for a very long time. And so that's another reason why it's so important to do it late in the research process.
Yes, I never thought about that. But yes, it obviously would make your novel vastly better to be able to be visiting these places through the eyes of your characters. That's
I really do hope so, yes.
Yeah, well, it makes a lot of sense. It had never really occurred to me that saving the travel until the first draft of the novel was finished would be a sensible way to go. But as soon as Kate explained it, it made perfect sense. But it's so interesting to me to discover the inner processes of these accomplished novelists, and especially to discover, the special kinds of way that they travel. Now, our final guest today is another novelist, Sarah Ridout. We met her last week in the episode about souvenirs that you bring back from your travels. So you might recall that Sarah has actually lived abroad for more than a decade in various parts of Europe. And so we had quite a wide-ranging chat about how living in foreign countries is both amazing for writing novels and for life in general.
Well, I think I'm in a sort of funny situation because I was an expat for 13 years. So I was sort of, rather than traveling, I was living.
Even better.
Yeah, in the different places. And, the old saying about a picture tells 1,000 words. Well, I think, immersion and living in a place can produce a book. I don't think my novel, Le Chateau, would have been as convincing if I hadn't lived in France for as long. I mean, 8 years in a country makes you pretty much of that country, I think.
Yeah, 8 years is a long time to really get to know a place.
It is, and you learn from osmosis, and you learn from every second of the day being there and going about your daily life, and just everything you see and sense and is different, and you pick up on it in different ways, and I think it stimulates you in different ways, and challenges you in different ways too. So it makes everything more complex, and your vision may be broader. And I think when you put that into creativity, I think it's helpful. And also for research, it makes you feel more confident in writing about something because you actually really do know about it. It's not like you've just had a 2-week holiday somewhere and you're writing a book about it. It's you're actually living it. You're living that life.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah, I have a couple of unpublished and unshowable to public people novel manuscripts in my metaphorical bottom drawer, but they're both the same thing, inspired by the countries that I lived in abroad. I think you get so many ideas because you're experiencing so many different cultures and different ways of life.
Yes, definitely. I think it's really important, and I think I was really glad. I've got 2 children, and they spend a lot of their life in France, so they've had a very I think especially to do that as a young age, it really changes you, and I mean it changes your brain. All the research says if you learn another language at that age, it helps with maths, it helps with all kinds of things that you wouldn't necessarily connect. It just broadens, and I think it goes across everything. Creativity, I just think, and you understand the world better, maybe. I think too.
Yeah, I think you just have that really open perspective because that such different things exist.
And are possible, and there are different ways of doing things, and sometimes they're better than the way they do them in your own country.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it gives you that ability to kind of to be more not critical, but to be able to compare things and to know that there's multiple ways to do the same thing. And
that's right.
A really different perspective from just living all your life in the one place.
Yeah, definitely. Now it'd be interesting to see your manuscripts. I wonder if
one day.
Bring them out one day.
Yes, it's one of those one-day tasks. It's
busy, isn't it, fitting everything in these days?
Yes. If I thought that they'd make me, 50 grand in a year, then I would do it. But I'm afraid I know too many authors, and I know that the chances of them giving me much return on investment is fairly low at the moment. So
yes, it's a bit of a challenging profession.
Yeah,
it's just in Scandinavian countries, I think it's Finland for sure. They actually pay authors. They actually have a wage
salary
from the government.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
really?
Isn't that good? I think everyone should do that.
They absolutely should. I know Scandinavia is a really smart area. I know in Iceland, what is it? Some huge percentage of people will publish a book in their lifetime.
Yeah,
I can't remember the stats, but it's it's just a fairly normal thing to do.
That's right. It's just it's incredible, isn't it? Just these different ways of doing things. And on the surface, maybe a government would say, "Oh, that's really expensive" or something. But if you look at all the other flow-on effects, it's actually not, and the return to the country is so great in terms of like cultural output and shared stories and identity, and like even with Scandinavian countries, the huge tourism that they're getting now because of Scandi noir and all of that stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's so many. There's so many benefits that are hard to directly quantify, perhaps. Or I don't know. Governments just don't want to think about it. It's too far out of their comfort zone or something.
That's right. I know. So
it's very sad.
It's interesting. Yeah, I think because of the traveling for writing, I think it just makes you more confident. You really feel, oh, wait, I can write about this place, or I can write about this time. If you feel like you've walked down the streets that your character lives in or whatever, or you've been to a special library where it's only got that, they're experts in that particular area, and you've read the original one, you've gone through all those things, you just feel more confident, I think, as well.
Yes, I can imagine you don't fear that there's going to be readers saying, hey, but this is completely wrong, or, it should be like this. What are you talking about?
That's right. You first arrive. I mean, I think when you're traveling, you see things differently as an outsider, and that's really important. But then if you're there long enough, you actually see things with more nuance and detail, because you actually become an insider, a local, over the time. So I think that's the difference. I think both are good, but I guess it depends what sort of book. I mean, my book is very immersive, I guess, and it's like a meditative, like, the time in France and stuff. It's not it is people read it quite quickly. I think it's gothic, and it's a bit of a thrilling sort of thing. The pace of it in terms of the lifestyle depicted in it is slow and very French.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. And the setting is then very important, and it's important that it's accurate. And
that's right. So it's got a kind of true kind of depiction, I think, of how people live there in terms of the seasons and the, being in touch with nature and, the awareness of food and wine and all of that stuff, and the production of those things, rather than it being removed from your everyday experience. It is in your everyday experience to be, living in a wine producing region and that sort of thing.
Sarah, of course, is a woman completely after my own heart, because she speaks very passionately about how much travel changes you, and how good it is for you and for your children. So, in fact, we spoke for well over an hour when we chatted about various topics for the podcast. But I agree with her that living in a place is a completely different scenario to travelling to a place. Of course, you can still find out an awful lot about a place, as Kate and Natasha talked about. And having read their work, I can say that they've definitely found out more than enough to be very convincing in their writing. But yes, certainly living in a place gives you another whole level of knowledge that you just can't get. And as I did confess in that chat with Sarah, I in the past have written a couple of drafts of novels which probably will never see the light of day, but you never know, in the future. Anyway, one of them is set in Japan and one in Slovakia, of course, 2 countries where I've lived for a year or 2. So those places had such an impact on me that it seemed natural to write something that was set in the places, almost also to remember some things that I found really fascinating about those places. So, yeah. Anyway, enough of my my little pile of manuscripts sitting on computer files somewhere. I wonder if any of you have done the same thing, or if you have ever dreamed of writing a novel or any kind of book set in the places that you've travelled to. Do let me know. Hop over to the Facebook group whenever you can. You can find us at Thoughtful Travellers and just request to join. I would love to hear about your thoughts on this matter. And of course, I'd love to tell you more about the 3 authors that we had on the Thoughtful Travel podcast today too, because you may well be very keen to have a read of their novels. So first up, we had Natasha Lester, and you can find Natasha at natashalester.com.au. Her first historical fiction, her 3rd novel, was A Kiss from Mr. Fitzgerald, set in New York. And it's absolutely fabulous. Easily the best book I read last year. So that's out now already. Whenever you listen to this, it's already out. And she has a new one coming out, Her Mother's Secret, which is available from late March of 2017. So probably about a month after this comes out. If you're listening to it later, hop online and find it. I'll leave links for her books and the other authors' books in the show notes. So after Natasha, I spoke with Kate Forsyth, and you can find Kate at kateforsyth.com.au. A couple of highlights of her recent publications. She's had a historical novel named Bitter Greens, set in Venice and France, and The Wild Girl and the Beast's Garden, set in Germany. So check them out. And finally, we had Sarah Ridout, and you can find her at sarahridout.com.au. And her first published novel was Le Chateau, obviously set in France. So some very useful and interesting and fun reading there for you. I'll leave links to all of those in the show notes, and the show notes are at notaballerina.com/43 for this episode. Don't forget, you can always get hold of me on Twitter as well, at Amanda Kendall, and use the hashtag ThoughtfulTravelPod, or join up with the Thoughtful Travellers Facebook group. I would love to chat with you there. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.
Jackrabbit FM for your ears.
Who is that? Hi, podcast.